Good morning. Thanks for joining me today. I'd like to begin by recognizing National Nursing Week. I've said before, and I'll say it again, that you learn a lot about your team during challenging times. These are challenging times, and so to all the nurses from across our province and country who are selflessly dedicating their time and energy to the front lines of this health pandemic, I say thank you. Thank you for putting your patients first. À toutes les infirmières de notre province et de notre pays qui consacrent de leur temps et leur énergie à la première ligne de cette pandémie de santé. Merci. Merci de donner la priorité à vos patients. This pandemic has undoubtedly placed extra strain on our healthcare system, and that is why we're doing everything we can to ensure that it's there for us and it's there for our loved ones today and in the future as well. I want every Manitoban to know how proud I am of them for stepping up, for working together, for helping their neighbors, for taking every precaution necessary to keep themselves safe and to help flatten the COVID curve. You're doing well. I'm sure this past weekend looked and felt very different for many Manitoba families that were celebrating Mother's Day. And it is important that we continue to follow the fundamentals, to practice good social distancing, especially now as we begin to slowly and carefully restart our economy. I wanted to provide today an update on some of our programs that were recently announced to help Manitobans navigate this unprecedented time. The Manitoba GAP program is providing small businesses with a bridge through the valley that we're in right now to a stronger and better future as we work with them to reopen safely and to rejoin the economy. And I'm proud to share with you today that just in the last few days since the launch of that program, we have helped over 1,800 small businesses who have successfully applied and already have received their funding of $6,000 each. That is the highest level of support for small businesses offered in any Canadian province. Over $11 million has already been paid out to small businesses as they look to recover and rebound. And this is critical. These are small businesses that are the backbone of our economy, and this support will position them to get back to providing services and creating jobs as soon as possible. Your government's been able to assist small businesses from all corners of the province. We've had people apply and been approved from communities like Brandon, Dauphin, the Interlake, Selkirk, right here in the city of Winnipeg, from St. James to Transcona, from St. Vital right across to McPhillips. And we're really pleased to be able to offer this support, and we encourage those small businesses who feel that have found that they can't qualify for support from other levels of government, from the federal government, to please consider applying for GAP support. We want to help you get through this valley. The second leg of our plan to revitalize our economy here in Manitoba and lead the resurgence in our country is our Summer Student Recovery Plan. And this is designed to support high school and post-secondary students in finding employment in the private sector, but also in the nonprofit sector as well. As of yesterday, we have already had 400 plus employers that have applied to this program, and there will be over 1,000 students getting jobs just in the last few days since that program launched its portal. That represents an additional more than $5 million in provincial assistance, and we're ready to do more. These two programs alone have already put over $17 million back into the hands of small businesses in Manitoba and represent the most generous support programs overall in their categories of any Canadian provinces, bar none. These programs are focused on incenting people to find work and incenting people to hire and to create jobs. To the young people and the students who've received jobs so far, I say congratulations to you. As our next generation of leaders, this is going to look great on your resumes and it'll serve you well in future endeavors. And I know that earning this income this summer, in the spring and summer in Manitoba, is going to help you to move forward and support yourself with the pursuit of your education and finding all that potential that exists within you. Today, I'm proud to announce another measure in our Manitoba Protection Plan, and that is our Green Team funding. Your government is going to provide up to $10 million in Green Team funding. That is nearly double the amount that was invested last year, and that will support community organizations, municipalities, and provincial parks in delivering Green Team projects this year and creating green jobs. We recognize the important role that meaningful work provides for young people in our province, and we know that the private sector is struggling right now, as we've seen with the latest StatsCan employment numbers. So it's important that we, through our government programs, up our game and support community-based organizations in creating jobs and opportunities across the province. These investments are going to help our youth gain critical work experience. They're going to help support our employers during the response and recovery phases of the COVID-19 pandemic, and they're going to help build our economy as well. Cet investissement aidera nos jeunes à acquérir une expérience de travail essentielle, à soutenir les employeurs pendant les phases d'intervention et de rétablissement de la pandémie de COVID-19 et à bâtir notre économie aussi. This summer alone, our funding is expected to support up to 2,000 young Manitobans in Green Team program positions. That's nearly double the programs supported last year. Our government is pleased to support programs that provide valuable work experience to young Manitobans while helping us build stronger and healthier communities at the same time. I encourage, and we will be encouraging, our municipal partners and others to advance additional green projects in the coming weeks, and we're very excited to see the opportunities those will provide for our young people throughout the province. Before I conclude today, I just wanted to acknowledge Manitoba's 150th anniversary. This is not the time for great celebration. We're restricted somewhat in our ability to do that, but it is certainly a time for us to pause and reflect on what we have here and very much count our blessings. We're in a wonderful country and a wonderful province. For generations, people have come from all over the world to our Keystone province in search of a safer and more prosperous life for themselves and their families. And they found that life here in Manitoba, which is the home of hope. They found a tolerant society that continues to welcome people from every region of the world. They found a compassionate society that faces its challenges together. They found an inclusive society composed of a diverse mosaic of cultures and customs and languages. And they found a society of freedom, too, and opportunity, where the only obstacle to achieving your potential is the size of your dreams. So I say the only thing better than today in Manitoba is definitely going to be tomorrow in Manitoba as we recover those freedoms that we've all sacrificed in the face of this pandemic. I know this is true because people across Manitoba are all making meaningful contributions to our province's economy and our society during good times, and more importantly, during tough times too. Manitoba's been the home of hope to people from all over the world for 150 years, and we're going to continue to be the home of hope for ourselves and for our children and grandchildren. And together we're going to beat this thing. Happy to take your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. A reminder to our reporters online, you will have one preliminary question and one follow-up. Up first from the Brandon Sun, Drew.
Thank you, Mr. Premier. It's Drew May from the Brandon Sun here. We've heard that the Brandon Keystone Center is facing around $2 million in lost revenue because of all the event cancellations. Just wondering if the province is considering any financial aid for the organization or in any talks with the Keystone Center about that?
Well, as you know, Drew, we had just increased the secure funding for the Keystone Center by a significant amount just some weeks ago. I'm not aware of any discussions that are underway currently, but we recognize that this is an iconic Manitoba attraction that's been the home of so many major events over the years and will continue to be. But as I say, Drew, I'm not aware of any current discussions. I can only say that we've clearly demonstrated as a government our appreciation for the work that's done at the Keystone Centre and its vital importance, not just to Westman, but to the province of Manitoba as a whole.
Just as a follow-up on a bit of a different topic, but we've also heard that the Manitoba Agricultural Services Corporation is facing up to 20%, or will have to cut salary costs by 20%. Just wondering if you could comment on, why that is and why they're asking to cut so much.
Manitoba Ag Services has been undergoing a number of changes well before the pandemic came along. There's not enough work for everybody right now, I can say that for sure. But the reality is that those changes you're referring to may well have been changes that were already contemplated pre-pandemic. I know, for example, that changes in procedures at MASC have resulted in eliminating the need through increased technological use for crop inspectors, for example, to travel from Portage la Prairie to Swan River twice to do claims processes, but rather eliminated that need through electronic signature applications. And this is just one example of technological improvements that are happening, some of them very belated and I think very common sense. Throughout our systems of government, we're improving the way we do things in response to the pandemic or in anticipation, frankly, of just the need to use technology for better purposes to serve our customers.
From CJOB, Diana.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. Diana here from 680 CJOB. What is your reaction to the fact that some unions were offered an opportunity to take a pay cut? In the case of QP at Manitoba Hydro, it was an 8% pay cut that was rejected, and now we are expecting layoffs. Is this an offer that's been made to all the unions that you are dealing with at Crowns, universities, and colleges and other organizations that have submitted their plans to government?
Well, I can only tell you we're in a pandemic. And the fact of the matter is that every aspect of society is impacted by it. You can't just turn away and hope it goes away. The reality is we're in it together as a family, and so every aspect of the private sector and the public sector is impacted. When the private sector, as you saw with StatsCan numbers last week, is impacted to the tune of close to 100,000 jobs lost, plus arguably more than 250,000 people impacted with wage loss and so on. That impacts on the need for services in the public sector as well. We've undertaken to minimize the impacts on public sector workers better than virtually any other jurisdiction in Canada, and we plan to continue to do that. We've always encouraged work share programs as opposed to layoffs, and I expect that those discussions will continue to be pursued by various Crown agencies as we move forward.
And just as a follow-up, are you able to outline specifically what offer has been made to the unions at the Crowns, the universities, and the colleges?
Well, as you know, the Crown agencies are managed by people in the employ of Crown agencies, and so they'll be making those negotiations happen. What we understand and what we've pursued is to minimize the impact on public sector workers as much as we possibly can. Here in Manitoba, our impact on the public sector is less than 2%. In the private sector, some argue to some degree at least more than 50% impact. We're trying to make sure that the vast majority of our public servants aren't impacted in a negative way by any of the decisions we have to make, while there is an impact very significantly being felt across our whole province. So 98% of workers are not going to be impacted. Approximately 2% will be impacted to some degree. That's positions us as a province which is run in such a manner as to impact our public sector less than virtually every other province in the country.
From the Winnipeg Sun, Scott.
Hello, Premier Scott Billick, Winnipeg Sun. How does the province justify $45 million for seniors, and then when it comes to $11 million gap for hydro, it means the upwards of $700 job cuts at Crown Corp.
Well, how do how do we justify a pandemic, I think was your question. We don't. But we have a choice to make. We can either pretend it's not there, or we can make decisions that reflect our understanding that it's real. And it is real. And it's being felt all over the province. And we're a family. And so in the private sector, there are impacts to the tunes of tens of thousands of people who've either lost their jobs or have lost significant income. Some have said over 50% of Manitobans in the private sector being impacted. We're asking for help from all Manitobans to get through this, and the impact on the public sector will be approximately 2%. That's the reality. How do we justify helping seniors? Seniors built this province. Seniors are the ones that are disproportionately impacted by COVID, and they're the ones that are living with the greatest stresses directly. So support for seniors in the province is, to me, merited and worthwhile. If there are seniors out there who don't wish to have the money, they have every option to decide what to do with it, and I trust them to do what they think is best. If they want to support a worthy charity, I encourage them to do so. If they want to help a young person in their family, I encourage them to do so. I trust them to make that decision. We can support seniors, and we can support our workers too, and we are doing both.
The follow-up then is, what is the message then for, your video this morning, you said it again today in your preamble about, the better day for the only better day for Manitoba other than today is tomorrow. What is the message for 700 hydro workers who that won't be the case?
Well, the message, I guess, is pretty clear. We're either going to act like there's a pandemic and respond to it appropriately, and there's going to be some consequence to a lot of us in the short term, most of us, in fact, because we're all in this together. Or we can ignore it and hope it goes away, but that isn't going to make our recovery very steep. It's going to drag out this thing a long time. So we're going to do this intelligently, and we're going to do it together. We paid $2 billion of taxpayer money into a fund to pay workers when there isn't enough work. And now some people are out there advocating that we shouldn't use that money. We should just borrow more and act like there isn't a pandemic. We're not going to do that. There is a pandemic, and we're going to draw on the Employment Insurance Fund for some of our workers, fewer than 2%. And that's going to be done on a temporary basis because we saved up for exactly this type of situation, and we're going to use savings that we had set aside. We're not going to add to our debt load. The highest indebted people in the country live in Manitoba. We're going to make sure that we do everything we can to keep as many people as possible at work in the public sector, and also help as many people as possible across the province get back to work as soon as we can. Our goal is to lead the country in recovering from this thing, and we don't do that by ignoring it. We do it by facing it.
From CBC Radio Canada, Patrick.
Bonjour, Monsieur Pallister, Patrick Foucault, Radio-Canada. Just to follow up on a few questions asked earlier, I know you've answered on the layoffs at Manitoba Hydro, the impact on the workers, but what would you tell the customers? So Manitobans who are concerned that their hydro services might be impacted by those layoffs, and will services be impacted, and so how?
I got the gist of the first part of your preamble there. I think the question was, will there be an impact on customer service? And I think the honest answer is, I doubt it. I think that the reality is that hydro provides many services to the private sector that it does not need to provide to such a degree right now, because the private sector in Manitoba is dysfunctional. You saw this with the employment numbers that were released last Friday. So you have over almost 100,000 Manitobans out of work. You have a number of small businesses that are still operating at reduced capacity or not operating at all. And hydro doesn't need to provide as many services right now to the private sector as it normally does. There's work for 98% of the people at hydro. There's not the 100% of work that there normally is. And so hydro is looking to take steps to find some savings in the short term with temporary measures, so that we can all recover together and get back to work.
Thank you, and hopefully the sound will be better here. Sorry about the technical problems earlier. So on another topic, yesterday today the Manitoba Nurses Union showed concerns regarding the fact that some nurses are being asked to wear only one mask per shift, and the union says this might facilitate the propagation of the virus, compromise their safety. We hear a lot that we have good amount of PPE and masks in the province, so why do we still ask that for nurses, and is this something your government wants to change?
I can't speak to the issue, the specifics of the issue you raise. I can only say that I know that our frontline workers are important to all of us, and we're doing our very, very best to provide support and resources to our frontline to the tune of now billions of dollars, much of that for personal protective gear. And I know also that many people are working very, very diligently within government and networking across the country and around the world to satisfy the needs for personal protective equipment as well. And those needs will very likely expand as more private sector businesses are able to get back up and running. I know that we've had some very good success at sourcing additional gear here in Manitoba and across Canada. And I know that those efforts are appreciated by all Manitobans.
From CBC Manitoba, Bart.
Mr. Premier, why cut hydro if you cannot derive a greater dividend from it right now?
Well, again, I would say we're in a pandemic. The need for work is not as great as we would like it to be. Our economy is obviously struggling. We've done a better job, I think, than many provinces. And I'm not being critical of other provinces. I just simply would say that we have kept the vast majority of our people in the public service fully employed since the beginning of this pandemic, apart from some employees at liquor lotteries. We've really essentially the impact on the public sector of layoffs has been minimal. At this point, we're looking for 2% contribution to the family cause of getting through this pandemic. From the public sector, we know that the private sector's contributions that have been forced upon them are multiples of that. And so we'll continue to take measured, balanced steps to get through this thing, but we can't go ahead as if there's nothing happening. It's a pandemic. It's global in nature. It has effects on our economy that are very real, and we're working to make sure that we minimize those effects, but we also have to balance the approach so that we can get through this thing together.
Okay, why cut the University of Winnipeg's funding when there's increasing interest in enrollment in post-secondary studies?
Well, again, the impact on the University of Winnipeg, I'd have to review the specifics, I think was under 2% as well. And the administration came forward with a proposal that would see some temporary reductions in expenditures in certain categories. As far as reductions in funding, we have a global pandemic here. It exists, it's real, and we have two choices. We can either just add to our already record levels of debt, the highest of any Canadians are endured by us in Manitoba, unless you ignore hydro debt. If you'd like to ignore it, you can, but it's real and it has to be serviced. And so we have a choice. We can either add to that debt and hand this obligation off to us when we're older or our kids, or we can deal with it responsibly now. So we're going to face up to the challenges of dealing with it responsibly now. That's the choice we're making. And I would emphasize again that in virtually every other jurisdiction in Canada, with the possible exception of two maritime jurisdictions that I've looked at, Manitoba has kept people working. We have been paying for all our civil servants, all their benefits, all their packages and pensions, right up till now, and now we're asking 2% of our public sector to share the burden by using a fund that we put $2 billion into over the last 10 years. I think it would be irresponsible not to use that source of additional support for our workers. I would prefer that we see work share arrangements entered into, and we have said as a government we would prefer that. Some of the unions have said they don't want to do that. That is what's brought us to the point we're at now. But to suggest we should do nothing is to suggest we should simply prolong the period of recession, and we won't do that. We're going to lead the country And recovering and getting through this together is what we're about as a family, so that's how we'll deal with this issue.
From the Canadian Press, Steve.
Steve Lambert from the Canadian Press. Premier, given that Manitoba Hydro is a Crown corporation, and I know the province backstops the debt, but its day-to-day operations are funded by ratepayers, how does cutting costs of hydro help the government? Because it doesn't seem to free up any money that can be transferred over from the Crown corporation to, say, the healthcare system. So how does cutting costs of hydro help the government?
Well, you could conversely ask, how does not cutting costs at hydro help the government? And I think the answer would be, it would deepen the period of recovery, increase the debt at hydro, which is a significant concern. We've overbuilt at hydro, so we have a massive debt there, as you know. And therefore, it would create greater likelihood that hydro wouldn't be able to contribute to the recovery going forward. We believe that Manitoba Hydro is an important asset owned by Manitobans, and we want to see it strengthened, not weakened.
And speaking of contributing to the recovery, a former government took a dividend from hydro around 2002. Are you planning to do something similar? And is that why you're trying to control costs of hydro so that there can be extra money extricated by the province?
No, hydro's a key asset for Manitobans, belongs to Manitobans. And if we can get through this thing, and we think that we're making good progress on recovering, better actually than many other provinces, when we get through this thing, hydro needs to be strengthened, not weakened. It has been weakened over the last number of years through some overbuild. There's some massive debt there. We own that debt. So again, the choice is simple. You can ignore the pandemic, increase the debt at hydro, and increase the government debt, and then we'll just have less money to work with going forward and a longer period of recovery. Instead, we think the responsible thing to do, because we are a Manitoba family, is for all of us to take a look at doing something now that responds to the realities of the pandemic. There's less work for everybody. 2% is what we're asking the public sector to do, to contribute, to assist with, and we think that that will speed the recovery. On a temporary basis, there'll be some lost work. There's no doubt about that. But the fact of the matter is, we need to get through this together as a family, and this is how we're going to do it.
From CTV Winnipeg, Jeff.
Hi, Mr. Premier, Jeff Teal, CTV. As we're approaching mid-March here, can you tell us when public gatherings could be increased from 10 to, I don't know what the number would be, 25 or 50? And dine-in restaurants, June 1st, do you see them being able to open June 1st with the 50% capacity?
As you know, Jeff, we've been very careful in putting the health of Manitobans at the forefront of our concerns, and we'll continue to do that. And we'll continue to act on the advice of our Chief Medical Officer and his team in respect of the decisions that we make. Others across the country have moved ahead in different ways, some slower, some faster. We think Manitoba's approach is right for Manitoba, so we're going to continue to take that approach. So I won't speculate on the larger group sizes. I can only say that I know many Manitobans would welcome the opportunity to be able to gather in larger groups with the social distancing attached to that out of necessity, and it is something that is under discussion.
Yeah, I guess my follow-up, though, would be, May Long's coming. Is there any chance that the gathering sizes would be increased by May Long?
Well, I'll ask you to ask Dr. Roussin that question. I can only say that certainly it's been a topic of discussion, and certainly we understand that with the forecast that we're going to listen to in the news tonight, it's going to tell us that our weather's warming up, and the temptation for us to get outside and enjoy a May Long weekend and other events across this beautiful province is going to be greater, not less. But I would emphasize again that even in so doing, and should the group size numbers change, we have to remember to adhere to the fundamentals that got us the progress that we've experienced to date. And that means social distancing, and it means It means staying home if you're sick, and it means hand washing more frequently than we're used to, probably most of us. We have to remember those fundamentals are what got us the progress to date, and that's what's going to take us forward.
From City News, Jonas.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. It's Jonas Gilbert with City News. Asking you today on the 150th anniversary of Manitoba, with the Manitoba Métis Federation taking over the BMO building downtown. David Chartrand said it kind of symbolizes to him a note of reconciliation moving forward. Can you just talk to us about what this symbolizes for you?
Well, the Métis people are at the forefront of Manitoba's history and will be a massive part of their future as well. And our respect for the Métis people is demonstrated in so many ways throughout this province. This is the province that was formed as a consequence of Métis organization and an insurrection of sorts against the intrusions of a federal government. But it was also a province that was formed out of a desire to become part of a greater country. And so I think that is a significant aspect of what this purchase may mean to some in the Métis movement. It's a symbol of the membership in the Canadian nation and the participation in our country.
Thank you, sir. No follow this morning.
Thank you.
From the Winnipeg Free Press, Larry.
Premier, notwithstanding your comments just now, I note that in your statement, official statement today on the province's 150th anniversary, that you make no mention of the Métis or First Nations or Indigenous people. Is this an oversight? Is it intentional? How come there's no mention in your official statement?
Well, Larry, because I also didn't mention veterans or pioneers or immigrants who helped form our population pre-Confederation or people from all over the world. So I guess I basically offended everyone by trying to be inclusive and make a statement about the unification of our province and the unity of our province. That was the intent of the statement. And I think that's something that we should celebrate. We're a province of incredible diversity, so I didn't choose to single out any group in my statement. I chose to think of us all as Manitobans in the context of Manitoba's 150th, which we celebrate today.
My follow-up is on the hydro cuts. I know a few minutes ago you said that there's not as much activity in the private sector, although the lights still have to stay on. The power still needs to be there, and given that Manitoba Hydro said exactly a year ago that further reductions would significantly increase the risk of public and employee safety, system reliability, levels of service, how do you justify cuts at this time?
Well, Larry, I don't think it's escaped anyone's attention. We're in a pandemic. It's a global pandemic. It has no precedent. And I doubt that Hydro, in its statement of a year ago, anticipated such a pandemic being a reality, but it is a reality. The impact, yes, the lights have to stay on, but there are projects across this province that aren't proceeding in the private sector right now for obvious reasons. There are numerous examples, which Hydro could provide you with if you like, I expect, of projects that are on hold or delayed as a consequence of the pandemic. The degree of work that is necessary right now is less than it has been for a long time with Hydro. And so I again would suggest that a statement made a year ago before this pandemic might be largely irrelevant in the presence of it.
From Global, Brittany.
Good morning, Mr. Premier. Brittany from Global News. We seem to be one of the only provinces slashing civil services this hard to go after the fight against COVID-19. BC right now has actually rescinded 1,500 layoff notices that were issued to TransLink Crown Corporation employees there. Why are we going so hard when unemployment is just going to roll us against being able to put money back in the economy while people aren't able to work?
Your assertion is not accurate, Brittany. There actually are 7 other provinces across Canada that have done more layoffs of public sector workers than Manitoba. I believe that we are just slightly higher in impacting on public servants than Nova Scotia and possibly New Brunswick. So every other province has done far more than we have, much more than we have, in terms of addressing the 2% requirement that we have applied to the public service. In terms of your second part of your thesis, the idea that we would somehow make the recession worse by not paying everyone for work that doesn't exist is simply wrong. We can't just borrow our way out of this pandemic. Well, I mean, others might try, but that's not the approach we're going to take as a government. We are already the most indebted people in the country when you factor in all our debts. And so adding to that will add to the burden of ourselves when we're older, future generations, our children, our grandchildren, others who come here to settle here, and will make us less competitive as a province. So what we're doing is a balanced approach that doesn't sell off our own future at the expense of satisfying everybody today. Frankly, we're making some difficult decisions as a government, and those difficult decisions may not have been made in the past, and they may not have been made by others who speculate, but they are being made today to make sure that we can emerge stronger as a province and that we can lead this country in recovering. In other words, that we'll come out of this pandemic stronger, not weaker.
And it's been more than 3 weeks since public sector unions were asked to start looking at those cuts. Have they been provided with a list of who's been deemed essential and non-essential yet?
Those are all part of the discussions that are ongoing, Brittany. You're going to hear from various aspects of government and government-funded agencies over the next while, I expect, about how those negotiations are going. The fact is that we've kept everybody except some dealers of cards at liquor and lotteries whole since this pandemic began. That's almost 2.5 months now of everybody being on the payroll and paid, even though there wasn't as much work as is normally the case without a pandemic. We've kept them on while close to half the private sector has been impacted. Close to 100,000 people have lost their jobs. We've treated the public sector with great respect. Now we're asking with great respect for the public sector to share to the tune of 2% in helping us find resources for our front lines, in helping us face the challenges that their friends and neighbors across the province are facing, because we're in this together. And we're going to treat this as any family would. If somebody else in the family is hurting, you don't stand back and do nothing. You step up and you do your part. And that's what we're going to do here in Manitoba, because that's the way Manitobans respond to these challenges, not by ignoring them, by addressing them. I want to say thanks to everybody. Be patient. Keep working. We're going to beat this thing.